After my daughter-in-law made it clear I was too old to travel to Paris with them, I surprised them in the airport VIP lounge I'd arranged as a gift. The morning of their departure, they walked into that VIP lounge expecting a nice send-off gift from Grandma. Instead, they found me sitting there with champagne, luxury luggage, and a private jet waiting for my own Paris adventure. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. My name is Eleanor. I'm 72 years old, and I live here in Denver, Colorado. I thought I was going to Paris with my family for what was supposed to be our dream vacation together. After working for decades in the airline industry, I know a thing or two about travel and what makes a trip special. But apparently, my son Michael and his wife Jessica had other plans for me. They decided I was too old, too slow, and too boring for their fun family vacation. What started as a wonderful family adventure slowly turned into something that excluded me completely. What they didn't know was that I still had connections in the aviation world they couldn't even imagine. Professional relationships I'd built over 30 years don't just disappear when you retire. And when my own family decided to treat me like a burden, well, I had some surprises in store for them. Let me tell you exactly how this all started, and how I showed them what this old lady was really capable of. By the time I was done, they realized they had seriously underestimated their boring old mother. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is simply proving everyone wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories like mine. Let me back up and tell you how this whole situation started. I spent over 30 years working my way up in the airline industry, back when it was much harder for women to advance in aviation. I started as a flight attendant in the early 70s when we were still called stewardesses. But I had bigger dreams than just serving coffee at 30,000 feet. Over the decades, I worked my way up to regional operations manager for a major airline here in Denver. I oversaw flight operations, airport logistics, and crew scheduling across multiple airports throughout the Mountain West. It was demanding work that required split-second decisions and managing hundreds of people, but I loved every challenging minute of it. When I retired 5 years ago, I had built relationships throughout the aviation industry that spanned the entire country. Since retirement, I've been keeping myself busy with travel, volunteer work, and spending time with my family. Nothing too extravagant, but I certainly get around more than most people my age. I've always believed that retirement should be about living, not just existing. About 6 months ago, my son Michael mentioned wanting to take his family to Paris for their first European adventure. His wife Jessica had always dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, and their twins Emma and Jake, both 12 years old, were absolutely thrilled about their first trip overseas. When Michael initially brought up the idea, he looked at me with excitement and said, "Mom, you should definitely come with us. You could show us all the best spots." I was absolutely delighted by the invitation. I'd been to Paris several times during my working days, coordinating international flights and handling complex logistics during layovers. I knew some wonderful little restaurants tucked away from the tourist crowds, had connections with people who could arrange special experiences, and genuinely looked forward to sharing this adventure with my family. In those early planning days, my suggestions were welcomed enthusiastically. I recommended some charming hotels near transportation hubs that offered excellent shuttle services to the airport. I mentioned restaurants I'd discovered where the staff still remembered me from my professional visits. I even offered to help with flight bookings through some of my industry contacts who could potentially get us better rates or seat upgrades. Jessica seemed particularly interested when I described a lovely Seine River cruise that offered both day and evening options. Michael was impressed when I mentioned restaurants that typically had month-long waiting lists but might accommodate us through my professional connections. The grandchildren were fascinated by my stories of navigating Charles de Gaulle Airport and all the behind-the-scenes operations they'd never considered. For the first few months, I threw myself into researching activities we could all enjoy together. I mapped out walking routes that would be manageable for everyone, found museums with special programs for families, and even located some aviation exhibits I thought the kids might find interesting given their grandmother's background. But as winter turned to spring, I started noticing subtle changes in how the family discussed the trip. Jessica began making comments about keeping the itinerary flexible for different energy levels. Michael mentioned they wanted to pack quite a lot into each day and hoped everyone could keep up with an ambitious schedule. When I suggested that lovely river cruise I'd mentioned earlier, Jessica's response was lukewarm. We're really looking for something with more energy and excitement. I tried to brush off these little comments, but they started accumulating like storm clouds on the horizon. During one family dinner, when I shared an article about a fascinating aviation museum in Paris, Emma looked up from her phone and said, "Grandma, that sounds kind of boring. We want to do fun stuff." Jessica quickly agreed. We're hoping to focus on activities that appeal to younger travelers. The shift was gradual but unmistakable. They stopped asking for my input on restaurant choices. When I mentioned walking tours I'd researched, Michael would nod politely but change the subject. Jessica started talking about maintaining a pace that works for active travelers and making references to energy levels that seemed specifically directed at me. I began to sense that my family's vision of this Paris adventure was evolving into something that didn't include their 72-year-old grandmother. As spring progressed into early summer, the subtle hints became much more direct concerns about my ability to keep up with their Paris plans. About 3 months before our scheduled departure, Jessica started dropping comments that made my heart sink a little deeper each time. "Eleanor, are you absolutely sure you can handle all the walking we're planning?" she asked during one family barbecue. "We're thinking of doing some pretty intensive days with museum hopping, extensive sightseeing, and covering a lot of ground on foot." When I assured her that I walked 3 miles every morning and was in excellent shape for my age, she gave me that patronizing smile I was beginning to recognize. Michael chimed in with what he clearly thought was helpful concern. "Mom, we just don't want you to feel pressured to keep up with our pace. We're planning some pretty ambitious days, and we want everyone to enjoy themselves without feeling stressed about the schedule." I tried to remain positive and reassure them that I was more than capable of handling an active itinerary. "I've been traveling independently since your father passed," I reminded them. "Just last year I spent a week hiking through parts of Colorado that would challenge people half my age." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The energy issue became Jessica's favorite topic of conversation. "We're really hoping to experience Paris nightlife too," she explained with enthusiasm. "The kids want to stay out late to see the city lights, maybe explore some trendy cafes, and experience the evening atmosphere. I'm just not sure that's really your scene anymore, Eleanor." When I mentioned that I'd thoroughly enjoyed Parisian nightlife during my professional travels and was perfectly comfortable with late dinners and evening activities, Jessica looked genuinely skeptical. "Well, that was different though, wasn't it? You were younger then, and it was work-related. This is vacation time, when we want to be spontaneous and energetic." The activity exclusions started becoming more obvious and hurtful. They began planning specific excursions without consulting me, making decisions based on assumptions about my limitations that felt increasingly insulting. "We're thinking about booking one of those bike tours through the city," Michael announced during dinner one evening. "You know, the ones where you cycle along the Seine and through different neighborhoods?" Before I could express interest, Jessica quickly added, "Though that might be too risky for someone your age, Eleanor. All that traffic and uneven terrain." When I protested that I'd been riding bikes my entire life and still enjoyed cycling around Denver, Michael looked uncomfortable. "It's not just about riding bikes, Mom. It's about navigating busy Parisian streets, with a group, keeping up with traffic patterns, and handling unexpected situations. We just think it might be challenging." The Seine River dinner cruise I'd originally suggested became another point of exclusion. "We've decided to do the evening cruise," Jessica informed me. "But it runs pretty late and involves quite a bit of standing on deck. You'd probably prefer an early dinner anyway, right? Somewhere more comfortable where you can sit and relax." Each assumption about my preferences and limitations felt like a small knife wound. When they discussed climbing the Arc de Triomphe, the response was immediate: "All those stairs might be too much for someone your age, Eleanor. There's no elevator, and it's quite a climb. Maybe you could wait at a nearby cafe while we go up?" I kept trying to assert that I could handle all of these activities, that my age didn't automatically disqualify me from adventure or physical activity, but they'd already made up their minds about what was appropriate for their elderly family member. The accommodation issue became the most painful discussion of all. During a family planning session in May, Jessica suggested with false sweetness that I might be more comfortable staying in a different hotel than the rest of the family. We found this lovely place that caters specifically to mature travelers, she explained. It's quieter, closer to medical facilities just in case, and has all the amenities someone your age might appreciate. Better bathroom facilities, closer to ground level, that sort of thing. When I said I preferred staying with the family, and had no need for special accommodations, Michael looked visibly uncomfortable. Mom, the thing is, we're probably going to be out pretty late most nights. You'd likely get better rest somewhere, suitable for your sleep schedule and needs. The underlying message was clear. We don't want to be responsible for you, and we don't want you cramping our style. But perhaps the most hurtful part was when I started overhearing Jessica's phone conversations with her friends and family. One afternoon, I'd come over to drop off some books for the children when I heard her chatting with her sister in the kitchen. I just want the photos to look fun and energetic, you know, Jessica was saying. We're finally taking this amazing family trip, and I don't want it to look like we're escorting someone on a geriatric tour. I want our Instagram posts to show adventure and spontaneity, not, well, you know what I mean. When I walked into the kitchen, she quickly changed the subject and greeted me with an overly bright smile. But the damage was done. I'd heard exactly how she viewed my presence on their dream vacation. By 2 weeks before our departure date, they'd essentially stopped including me in any planning conversations. When I asked about specific flight times, Michael gave me vague responses. We'll let you know once everything's finalized, Mom. When I inquired about restaurant reservations, Jessica would say, we're keeping things flexible for now. Meanwhile, Jessica's social media posts about their upcoming trip were filled with references to young family adventures and high-energy European exploration. The message was becoming crystal clear. Their vision of the perfect Paris vacation had no room for their boring, slow, elderly family member. I felt increasingly like I was being pushed out of my own family's special trip, relegated to the role of someone they had to manage rather than someone they wanted to share experiences with. What hurt the most was realizing that they'd made all these assumptions about my capabilities and interests without ever actually asking what I wanted or what I was capable of doing. The moment that changed everything happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon in late June, just 10 days before their scheduled departure. I'd stopped by Michael and Jessica's house to drop off some travel-sized toiletries I'd picked up for the children, along with a guidebook about Paris museums that I thought Emma might enjoy. I used my key to let myself in, as I'd always done, calling out hello as I entered. When no one answered, I assumed they might be out in the backyard or upstairs. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen, so I headed in that direction to find them. But as I got closer, I heard my name mentioned in their conversation, and something in Jessica's tone made me stop just outside the kitchen doorway. What I heard in the next few minutes absolutely shattered my heart. I am so relieved we're finally taking this trip without Eleanor, Jessica was saying with obvious satisfaction. Can you honestly imagine trying to drag her through all those museums we want to see? She'd be complaining about her feet hurting within the first hour. Guaranteed. Michael's response was like a physical blow. You're absolutely right. Mom would definitely slow us down at every turn. Remember how she complained about the walking when we went to that outdoor shopping center last month? She kept asking if we could find a bench to rest. Exactly, Jessica continued, and I could hear the relief in her voice. And forget about any spontaneous plans or last-minute changes. Everything would have to revolve around her schedule, her energy level, her need for bathroom breaks every 20 minutes. This way we can actually enjoy ourselves instead of constantly checking on her and making sure she's keeping up. I stood there in their hallway, gripping the travel items I'd brought for their children, feeling like someone had just punched me in the stomach. But the conversation continued, and it only got worse. The kids can actually have fun now without worrying about entertaining grandma or slowing down for her, Michael added. We can do all those bike tours, stay out late, explore the nightlife without having to get her back to the hotel by 8 o'clock because she's tired. Jessica laughed, and the sound was cruel. Oh God, can you imagine her trying to keep up with Emma and Jake on those bicycles? Or attempting to stay awake past dinner time for any of the evening activities? We'd spend the whole trip accommodating her limitations instead of making memories. Then Jessica launched into what was clearly a topic she'd given considerable thought to. I've already planned out all my Instagram posts for this trip. Young family living their best life in Paris, experiencing adventure and spontaneity. It's going to be absolutely perfect for my social media presence. No offense to Mom, Michael said. Though his words felt deeply offensive, she doesn't exactly fit the aesthetic Jessica's going for. Her followers want to see energy and excitement, not, well, you know. Exactly. I want to document a trip that looks fun and vibrant. Jessica continued. I don't want every photo to look like we're chaperoning someone's grandmother through tourist traps. I want content that shows we're young, active, adventurous people exploring one of the world's most romantic cities. At this point, I heard Emma's voice join the conversation. Plus, Grandma would just want to sit in cafes all day reading those boring guidebooks she's always carrying around. Jake chimed in with 12-year-old bluntness. And she'd probably get lost without us holding her hand everywhere. Remember when she couldn't figure out how to use the GPS in her car? The cruelest part was hearing my entire family laugh at these characterizations of me. They were painting a picture of a helpless, boring, burdensome old woman who bore no resemblance to the person I actually was. But the conversation wasn't finished, devastating me yet. Plus, this way we can actually afford to do all the fun stuff we really want, Jessica continued, moving into financial territory that showed how little they understood my situation. We won't have to pay for her senior discounts and special accommodations, or limit ourselves to restaurants that cater to elderly dietary restrictions. We can stay in that boutique hotel we originally wanted instead of having to find someplace with elevators and handicapped accessibility, Michael added. We can be spontaneous about dining instead of having to plan around early bird specials and bland food preferences. They had no idea that I'd been quietly planning to contribute a substantial amount to their trip expenses, or that my airline connections could have provided upgrades and experiences they'd never be able to access on their own. The final blow came when Michael started discussing the logistics of excluding me completely. I'll tell Mom next week that we've decided to make it a smaller, more intimate family trip, he said with the tone of someone solving a practical problem. I'll say something about budget constraints or limited hotel availability, something that doesn't sound personal. Jessica's response was swift. Just don't mention any of this conversation, obviously. The last thing we need is her getting emotional and making this whole situation difficult. You know how sensitive she can be about family stuff. She'll probably be disappointed initially, Michael continued. But honestly, she'll probably be relieved in the long run. No pressure to keep up. No worrying about whether she's enjoying herself. She can plan her own vacation at her own pace with people her own age. Jake's voice piped up again. Maybe she can take one of those bus tours for old people instead. The laughter that followed that comment was the final straw. I stood there in their hallway, listening to my own family discuss me like I was a burden they'd cleverly managed to avoid. Every suggestion I'd made, every offer to help, every expression of excitement about sharing this experience with them, all of it had been meaningless. Worse than meaningless. It had been unwanted. They saw me as a limitation on their fun, an embarrassment to their image, a responsibility they were relieved to escape. The grandmother who had helped raise these children, who had supported this family in countless ways, who had professional experience and connections that could have enhanced their trip, reduced to a stereotype of a helpless, complaining elderly burden. I quietly set down the travel items I'd brought on their hall table and slipped out of their house without making a sound. I drove home in complete silence, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. That night, I sat in my living room, looking at old photographs from my airline career days, pictures of me coordinating complex international logistics, managing crisis situations, traveling confidently around the world. I remembered the respect I'd commanded in professional situations, the expertise I'd developed, the relationships I'd built across the aviation industry. Suddenly, for the first time since overhearing that cruel conversation, I smiled. Because my family had made a crucial error in their assessment of their boring old grandmother, they had no idea what I was still capable of, or what resources I could still access when properly motivated. If they wanted a young, energetic, spontaneous Paris adventure without the burden of elderly supervision, I was about to show them exactly what energy and adventure really looked like. That Monday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out my old address book, the leather-bound one I'd maintained throughout my entire career. Page after page of names, phone numbers, and notes about colleagues, contacts, and friends I'd made across the aviation industry. If my family wanted to see what energy and adventure really looked like, I was going to give them a masterclass they'd never forget. I started by calling Sarah Martinez, who had been a junior coordinator when I was regional operations manager, but had worked her way up to become a regional director at Delta Airlines. When she answered, her voice immediately brightened. "Eleanor, oh my goodness, how wonderful to hear from you. It's been far too long." Sarah's enthusiasm was genuine and warming. "How have you been? How's retirement treating you?" "I'm doing very well, Sarah. Thank you for asking. Actually, I'm calling because I could use a favor, and I thought you might be able to point me in the right direction." I explained that I wanted to arrange something special for a last-minute trip to Paris, something that would showcase what the aviation industry could offer to someone with the right connections. "Say no more, Eleanor. After everything you did for my career, helping me navigate those early promotions and endorsing me for advancement, this is the least I can do." Sarah's voice was filled with determination. "Let me make some calls and get back to you within the hour. What dates are we talking about?" When I told her the exact same weekend as my family's trip, she paused for just a moment. "That's cutting it close. But for you, Eleanor, I'll make it happen. You were always the one who taught us that impossible deadlines just required creative solutions." True to her word, Sarah called me back 53 minutes later with information that made me smile for the first time since that devastating conversation I'd overheard. "I've got something perfect for you," she said excitedly. "Remember Captain Jim Peterson? He used to fly our international routes back in the day, and you helped him get approved for those coveted European runs when there was that whole bureaucratic mess with his certifications." I did remember Jim, a skilled pilot who'd been caught up in paperwork issues that threatened to derail his career, until I'd intervened with the right people at the right time. Well, Jim flies private jets now for high-end clients, and as it happens, he has a client who just canceled a flight to Paris for this exact weekend. The plane owner would rather have the aircraft used than sitting empty, and Jim would love to do you a favor. He can offer you the trip at a fraction of the usual cost, basically just covering fuel and operational expenses. My heart started racing with possibilities. "Sarah, that sounds absolutely perfect. How do I reach Jim?" "He's expecting your call," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Eleanor, I have to say, it's going to be wonderful to see the industry take care of one of our own. You did so much for so many of us over the years." I called Captain Jim Peterson immediately, and his warm greeting transported me back to the professional relationships that had defined so much of my working life. "Eleanor, Sarah told me you need to get to Paris in style, and frankly, after the way you went to bat for me with those certification issues, I've been waiting for a chance to return the favor." Jim's voice carried that confident pilot tone I remembered well. "This client cancellation actually works out perfectly. The plane is a beautiful Gulfstream, seats 8 comfortably, and I was going to have to ferry it empty anyway." "Jim, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this," I said, already feeling the excitement building. "Are you kidding? You saved my career when those bureaucrats were trying to ground me over paperwork technicalities. Taking you to Paris is going to be my pleasure." He paused thoughtfully. "Actually, let me ask you something. Would you be interested in departing from Denver International at roughly the same time as the commercial flights to Paris? I could coordinate with ground operations to make sure we cross paths with any family members who might be traveling commercially that day." I nearly laughed out loud at his intuitive understanding of what I might be hoping to accomplish. "Jim, that would be absolutely perfect. Consider it done. I'll coordinate with the ground crew and make sure we're visible from the commercial terminal areas during departure. Sometimes it's nice when family members can see exactly what their loved ones are capable of arranging." My next call was to Maria Santos at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Maria had been my primary contact for handling complicated logistics during my working days, and we developed both a professional and personal friendship over the years. When I reached her, she immediately launched into rapid French-accented English. Mon Dieu, Eleanor, so good to hear your voice. I was just thinking about you last month. When we had a complex situation with diverted flights, I kept thinking, Eleanor would know exactly how to handle this efficiently. I explained my situation, and Maria's response was immediate and enthusiastic. You want VIP treatment that shows your family what real aviation connections can accomplish? Eleanor, I can arrange everything. Private terminal access, expedited customs, luxury ground transportation, the complete executive experience. You will be treated like industry royalty, which is exactly what you deserve. Maria, you're amazing. I knew I could count on you. This is nothing compared to what you did for me when I was trying to get promoted to terminal management. You wrote that recommendation letter that changed my entire career trajectory. Her voice grew more excited as she planned. I will personally oversee every detail. When you arrive in Paris, you will see what happens when someone with your reputation and connections travels through my airport. But Maria wasn't finished. Actually, let me call some people. I think we can arrange some very special experiences during your Paris visit. I know people at the major museums who owe me favors. Restaurant managers who remember the old days when we worked together on VIP visitor logistics. Give me 2 days and I will create an itinerary that would make heads of state jealous. Over the next 2 days, my phone rang constantly as my old professional network sprang into action. Word had somehow gotten around that Eleanor was planning something special, and people I hadn't spoken to in years were calling to offer assistance. Captain Peterson called back with updates. Eleanor, I've been talking to the crew, and everyone's excited about this trip. The cabin attendant, Rachel, actually remembers you from a conference years ago. She said you gave a presentation about crisis management that changed how she handled difficult situations. She's planning to make this flight absolutely perfect for you. Maria called from Paris with increasingly elaborate arrangements. Eleanor, I have reserved you a suite at Hotel Plaza Athénée. You remember, where we used to coordinate accommodations for airline executives. The manager, Claude, still remembers you and is providing their finest suite at a courtesy rate. Also, I have arranged a private tour of the Louvre with the assistant curator, who happened to be married to an Air France executive I worked with for years. But the most touching call came from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. Robert Chen, who had been a young airport operations coordinator when I was his supervisor, and who now managed VIP services at Denver International Airport. Miss Eleanor, he said. And I could hear the respect in his voice that transported me back to our working relationship. I heard through the industry network that you're taking a special trip this weekend. I wanted you to know that I've personally arranged for you to use our executive services here in Denver. Private car service to the aircraft, expedited security, the complete VIP experience. It's the least I can do for someone who taught me everything I know about managing complex logistics under pressure. Robert, you don't need to do all that, I protested, though I was deeply moved. Miss Eleanor, do you remember when I made that huge mistake with the weather delay protocols my first month on the job? You could have written me up, or recommended termination. Instead, you spent your own time training me, explaining not just what to do but why it mattered. That lesson shaped my entire approach to this industry. His voice was firm with determination. Saturday morning, you're going to see what kind of professional respect you've earned over the years. By Thursday, I had confirmed the most extraordinary travel experience of my life. Private jet departure from Denver, VIP treatment at both airports, luxury accommodations in Paris, and access to experiences that weren't available to regular tourists at any price. But more than that, I had confirmed something I'd almost forgotten. The professional relationships I'd built over decades weren't just memories. They were active, powerful connections that people were honored to activate for someone they respected. Thursday evening, I spent time planning my travel wardrobe. I selected my finest business travel outfit, a sophisticated navy suit that I'd worn to important industry conferences, paired with elegant accessories that projected both competence and style. I packed my best luggage, the leather pieces I'd used for important business trips throughout my career. Friday morning, I called Michael with carefully controlled excitement in my voice. "Michael, honey, I have a surprise for your family's Paris trip tomorrow," I said cheerfully. "I've arranged VIP lounge access for you at the airport through some old airline connections. Consider it my contribution to your wonderful adventure." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before Michael responded with obvious surprise. "Mom, that's amazing. How did you manage to arrange that? That kind of thing must be expensive." "Oh, it's just a favor from a former colleague," I said lightly. "When you work in the industry for as long as I did, you maintain certain relationships. I thought it would be a nice way to send you off in style." "Mom, that's incredibly generous. Jessica is going to be thrilled. She loves that kind of VIP treatment." Michael's voice carried genuine gratitude mixed with surprise. "How exactly does this work?" I gave him the details for accessing the VIP lounge, the specific timing, and the contact information. "Just tell them you're Eleanor's family, and they'll take care of everything. Have a wonderful time and take lots of pictures." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen smiling. They thought they were getting a nice send-off gift from their boring old grandmother. What they didn't realize was that they were about to discover exactly what their grandmother was capable of when she decided to show them what real connections and real adventure looked like. Saturday morning, I woke up feeling more energized and purposeful than I had in years. I dressed carefully in my sophisticated travel outfit, gathered my elegantly packed luggage, and prepared for what I knew would be the most satisfying departure of my life. Robert Chen's promised VIP service was flawless. A luxury car picked me up at my house and delivered me directly to the private aviation area of Denver International. I was escorted through security with the efficiency and respect I remembered from my working days, treated like the aviation industry veteran I was. As I settled into the VIP holding area with a glass of champagne, waiting for Captain Peterson to complete his pre-flight preparations, I thought about my family, who at that very moment were probably dealing with regular commercial airline hassles, long security lines, crowded terminals, cramped economy seats, and the stress of managing luggage and logistics for a family of 4. In about an hour, they would arrive at the VIP lounge I'd arranged for them, expecting a pleasant surprise from Grandma. Instead, they were going to discover that their boring, helpless old grandmother was already there, preparing to board a private jet for the same destination they were struggling to reach through commercial aviation. Captain Peterson appeared in the doorway, impeccably uniformed and grinning. "Miss Eleanor, your aircraft is ready for departure, and I have to say, this is going to be the most satisfying flight I've taken in years. Are you ready to show your family what real aviation connections look like?" I stood up, gathered my things, and smiled back at him. "Jim, I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Saturday morning arrived with perfect clarity. I woke up feeling more energized and purposeful than I had in years. After dressing carefully in my sophisticated Navy travel suit and gathering my elegantly packed luggage, I was ready for what I knew would be the most satisfying departure of my life. Robert Chen's promised VIP service was flawless from the moment the luxury car arrived at my house. I was transported directly to the private aviation area of Denver International and escorted through security with the efficiency and respect I remembered from my working days. Every staff member treated me like the aviation industry veteran I was. At exactly 10:30, I positioned myself strategically in the VIP lounge I'd arranged for my family. I was seated comfortably near the entrance with a glass of champagne, my elegant luggage beside me, reading a travel magazine while waiting for their arrival. At 10:47, I heard those familiar voices approaching the lounge entrance, Emma's excited chatter about Grandma's surprise, and Jake's enthusiasm about how cool this is going to be carried clearly through the corridor. Jessica was already discussing photo opportunities, and Michael was explaining VIP lounge protocols to the children. They walked through the entrance, looking around in genuine amazement at the upscale environment. Plush seating, complimentary refreshments, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, and an atmosphere of luxury clearly beyond their usual travel experience. "Wow, Grandma really came through for us," Jessica said to Michael, already pulling out her phone to capture the elegant space. This is exactly the kind of content my followers love to see. Jake spotted me first. Grandma? He called out in complete confusion. What are you doing here? The entire family froze mid-conversation, staring at me as if they were seeing a ghost. I set down my champagne glass, stood up gracefully, and smiled at them with genuine warmth. Well, hello everyone. What a wonderful coincidence running into you here, I said pleasantly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Michael was the first to find his voice, though it came out slightly strangled. Mom? I thought, what are you doing in the VIP lounge? With luggage? Oh, I arranged this lounge access for you, didn't I? I replied cheerfully. I thought I should check to make sure everything was set up properly. And yes, I'm traveling today too. What are the odds? Jessica's face had gone noticeably pale. Traveling? Where are you going? Paris, of course, I said brightly. Same destination as you. Isn't that a delightful coincidence? The silence that followed was almost comical. Emma and Jake looked back and forth between their parents and me, clearly sensing tension but not understanding it. Michael kept opening and closing his mouth like he was trying to form words that wouldn't come. Finally, Jessica managed to stammer. But how? We thought you weren't coming with us. Oh, you were absolutely right about that, I said with a smile that felt more genuine than any expression I'd worn in weeks. You made it very clear that I needed a different kind of trip, something more suitable for my energy level and capabilities, so I arranged my own. Before anyone could respond, an elegantly dressed crew member approached our seating area. He wore the crisp uniform of a private aviation company and addressed me with professional courtesy. Miss Eleanor Thompson, your aircraft is ready for departure whenever you are, he said respectfully. Captain Peterson sends his regards and wanted me to tell you that weather conditions are perfect for your flight to Paris. The family stared in absolute shock. Michael's mouth actually dropped open. Aircraft? Jessica whispered, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Oh yes, I said casually, gathering my purse. That's Captain Peterson. We'll be flying together today. He's an old colleague from my airline days. Jake, with 12-year-old directness, asked the question everyone was thinking. Grandma, are you flying in your own airplane? Private jet. Actually, I corrected gently. Much more efficient than commercial flights, and certainly more comfortable for someone my age. At that moment, Robert Chen appeared in the lounge. I'd worked with Robert when he was starting his career, and now he managed VIP services for the entire airport. He approached our group with obvious respect and familiarity. Miss Eleanor, I hope everything has been to your satisfaction this morning, he said with genuine warmth. Your ground transportation went smoothly, I trust. Everything has been absolutely perfect. Robert, thank you for coordinating all the details, I replied, then turned to my family. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Robert Chen. He manages executive services here at the airport. Robert, this is my family. Robert nodded politely to them, then continued addressing me. Your luggage has been loaded, and Captain Peterson is ready when you are. I've also confirmed your VIP arrival arrangements at Charles de Gaulle. Maria sends her regards and says everything is prepared for your arrival. Jessica found her voice again, though it sounded strained. Eleanor, I don't understand. How do you know all these people? How are you arranging private jets and VIP services? I smiled at her confusion. Well, dear, when you work in the aviation industry for over 30 years, you tend to maintain certain professional relationships. People remember when you've helped their careers, or solved difficult problems for them. Michael was staring at me as if he was seeing a completely different person. Mom, I had no idea you still had these kinds of connections. You retired years ago. The relationships I built during my career didn't retire when I did, I explained gently. When you treat people with respect and help them succeed, they tend to remember that. Sarah Martinez at Delta coordinated Captain Peterson's availability. Maria Santos is handling my arrival arrangements in Paris. Robert here made sure my departure went smoothly. These are people I worked with, mentored, or helped during their careers. But Mom, Michael continued, clearly struggling to process this revelation. This level of coordination, these connections. I never realized you had maintained this kind of professional network. There's quite a lot about my capabilities that you seem to have overlooked, I replied with gentle but unmistakable firmness. The crew member cleared his throat politely. Miss Eleanor, I don't want to rush you, but we do have our departure slot to consider. Of course, I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. Well, this has been lovely seeing you all. As I began to walk toward the departure area, Jessica called after me desperately, Eleanor, wait. I still don't understand how you're doing all this. The private jet, the VIP treatment, how much is this costing you? I turned back with a patient smile. Oh, it's not primarily about the money, dear. It's about the relationships. Captain Peterson owed me a favor from when I helped save his career during some bureaucratic difficulties. The aircraft owner prefers to have the plane used rather than sitting empty. Maria is arranging special experiences in Paris through her connections. Most of this is professional courtesy, the kind you receive when people respect your expertise and remember your contributions. Jake was looking at me with obvious awe. Grandma, this is so cool. Can we see your airplane? Before Jessica could object, I said, of course. Why don't you all walk with me to see the aircraft? It might be educational. As we walked through the private aviation terminal, I could see my family processing this completely new image of their supposedly helpless grandmother. Other airport staff nodded respectfully as we passed, clearly recognizing me from my working days or through professional connections. When we reached the viewing area where they could see the sleek Gulfstream jet positioned on the tarmac, Emma gasped, Grandma, that's your plane? For today, it is, I said with obvious satisfaction. Isn't she beautiful? Captain Peterson maintains her in absolutely perfect condition. Michael was shaking his head in disbelief. Mom, I don't know what to say. I had no idea you could arrange something like this. There's quite a lot you don't know about what I'm capable of, dear, I replied with meaningful emphasis. You seem to have very fixed ideas about my limitations and energy levels. I thought it might be educational to demonstrate that your assumptions were perhaps a bit narrow. Jessica was frantically taking pictures of the private jet, clearly trying to process how this would affect her carefully planned social media narrative about their young family adventure. Captain Peterson appeared at the terminal entrance and waved to me, even from a distance. His bearing and professionalism were obvious. I waved back and called to my family. That's Jim. We should head over. He likes to maintain precise departure schedules. As we walked toward the aircraft, I continued. By the way, I should mention my itinerary for Paris. Tonight I have dinner reservations at Le Meurice. Maria arranged that through the restaurant manager who remembers me from coordinating airline executive visits. Tomorrow I have a private tour of the Louvre with the assistant curator. And tomorrow evening, I'm watching the sunset from a friend's apartment that overlooks the Eiffel Tower. I paused to let that information sink in before adding all experiences that are generally not accessible through normal tourist channels, but available when you have the right professional relationships. Michael looked stunned. Mom, those are incredibly exclusive experiences. How did you? Professional networks, dear, I said simply. The aviation industry connects to hospitality, tourism, cultural institutions. When you've worked internationally for decades, you develop relationships across many sectors. As we reached the aircraft, Captain Peterson approached with a warm smile. Eleanor, ready for our Paris adventure? He shook my hand with obvious respect and familiarity, then nodded politely to my family. You must be Eleanor's family. She's told me so much about you. The crew member who had first approached us appeared with a final question. Miss Eleanor, would you like the champagne service immediately after takeoff, or would you prefer to wait until we reach cruising altitude? After takeoff will be perfect, I replied, then turned to my family one final time. Well, this has been delightful, but I should board now. We have a wonderful flight ahead of us. Jessica seemed to finally find her voice, though it sounded small and uncertain. Eleanor. This is incredible. I had no idea you could arrange something like this. Yes, I said with a meaningful look. There seems to be quite a lot about me that you didn't realize. I smiled warmly at my grandchildren. Emma, Jake, I hope you have a wonderful time in Paris. Take lots of pictures. As I walked up the aircraft steps, I turned back one final time. Oh, and Jessica, I hope you get some good content for your social media. Though I imagine your followers might be curious about how Grandma ended up on a private jet anyway, enjoy your economic seats. The last thing I saw before entering the aircraft was my family standing on the tarmac, staring up at me with expressions ranging from shock to awe to complete bewilderment. As the aircraft door closed and I settled into the luxurious cabin, Captain Peterson's voice came over the intercom. Welcome aboard, Eleanor. This is going to be one of the most satisfying flights of my career. During the flight to Paris, I had time to reflect on what had just happened. My family had seen a completely different side of their boring old grandmother. The professional woman who had built relationships across an entire industry, who commanded respect from colleagues, who could arrange experiences they couldn't access with any amount of money. When we landed at Charles de Gaulle, Maria's promised VIP treatment was flawless. I was escorted through a private terminal, whisked through customs with diplomatic efficiency, and transported to my hotel in a luxury vehicle. Over the next 3 days, my Paris experience exceeded every expectation. The private Louvre tour revealed artworks and stories that regular visitors never hear. Dinner at Le Maurice was exquisite, made even more special by the maître d'hôtel, who remembered coordinating with me during airline executive visits. The sunset viewing from the apartment overlooking the Eiffel Tower was magical, a privilege available only through personal relationships built over decades of professional respect. I documented everything tastefully on social media, sharing the genuine joy of these extraordinary experiences. The photos showed a confident, elegantly dressed woman living life to the fullest, surrounded by luxury and exclusive access that spoke to professional accomplishments and maintained relationships. Meanwhile, I occasionally saw my family's posts from their Paris trip. They were clearly having a good time, but their experiences looked quite ordinary compared to the access and luxury I was enjoying. Budget hotels, tourist restaurants, crowded attractions, and the general hassles of commercial travel were evident in their photos. On my final day in Paris, I received a text from Michael. Mom, we saw your Instagram posts from Paris. I don't know what to say. How did you arrange all of those incredible experiences? Those restaurants, those private tours, we had no idea you had access to that level of everything. I replied simply. When people respect your professional contributions and remember how you've helped their careers, they're honored to extend courtesies. I hope you're all having a wonderful time. His response came quickly. We are, but I have to say, your trip looks absolutely amazing. We clearly underestimated what you're capable of arranging and experiencing. Yes, I texted back. I think you did. When I returned to Denver, the same VIP treatment awaited. Robert Chen personally ensured my arrival was seamless, and the luxury car service delivered me home refreshed and energized from one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. That evening, as I unpacked my luggage and looked through the photos from my extraordinary Paris adventure, I realized something important had shifted. I had reminded myself, and demonstrated to my family, that age doesn't diminish professional relationships, expertise, or the ability to command respect. Their assumptions about my limitations said more about their narrow thinking than about my actual capabilities. Most importantly, I had proven to myself that retirement doesn't mean becoming irrelevant. The connections I'd built, the expertise I'd developed, and the respect I'd earned throughout my career weren't memories. They were active, powerful resources that people were honored to activate for someone they valued. My family had wanted a young, energetic adventure without the burden of elderly supervision. What they discovered was that their elderly family member was capable of adventures they couldn't even access, powered by relationships built on competence, respect, and professional excellence. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is simply demonstrating, with grace and dignity, exactly what you're capable of accomplishing. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever been underestimated by family members who made assumptions about what you're capable of based on your age? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine.